Okay, so welcome back to the HR committee. We've got some new members, so welcome. So I'm Councillor Edwards, the chair of the Human Resources Committee, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the meeting, which is being held virtually and in accordance with the council rules for virtual meetings, which reflect the recently published government regulations. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube and will also be available to view after the meeting is finished. Councillors who sit on this committee are identified by name on the screen, and I will introduce the officers by name before they address the committee. Councillors are reminded that although this meeting is being held remotely, they are regarded as being present in a meeting of the council. Members ensure that their mobile phones are switched off or on silent. So members of the committee will turn on their video link during the meeting and keep their microphones muted unless they have been invited to speak by myself as the chair. Members are reminded that if they switch off their video link or move away from the camera, they will be treated as leaving the meeting and will not be able to take part in any vote taken on the item under discussion. Members can indicate their wish to speak by raising their hand and should only speak when I, as chair, invite them to do so. The officers present will only switch on their video link during the item they are presenting or where they wish to be invited to speak by me as the chair. As chair, I confirm the name of any visiting speaker at the appropriate time in the agenda who will address the committee by audio link. Their video link if they have a disclosable pecuniary interest or other personal interest in an item on the agenda. The councillors can switch on a video link when I call the next agenda item. Voting will take place by roll call, and I will confirm the recommendation proposed to the committee before voting begins. Can each member indicate whether they are for or against the recommendation or whether they wish to abstain? So hopefully we won't have any councillors that if their connection is lost, that they should immediately advise Democratic Services and use their meeting link to access the meeting again. Okay, so item 1, apologies for absence. I think we've got a full house, so good start. And as we are a new council year, appointment of vice chair. So can I ask for any nominations for vice chair, please?
Chair, I'd like to nominate Samuel Carr for this, if that's possible.
Brilliant, and I would like to second that. Any other nominations? No, so it looks like that's agreed. So congratulations, Councillor Carr. Okay, so item 3, declarations of interest from anybody. Oh. Okay. Any urgent matters? I don't consider there to be any, so I think we should move on to the next agenda item. Okay, so item 5 is minutes of the meeting held on the 1st of March 2021. I appreciate not everybody was a member of the committee at that time, but can I just confirm that those who were in attendance agree with the accuracy of the minutes?
I'm happy with them, Laura, thank you.
Perfect. Okay, so you should have all received an email from Democratic Services about the appointments to the Joint Consultative Committee. So that will be myself as the chair, Councillor Rattigan as the portfolio holder, and we're looking for 3 other members to join. If possible, we would look to have them held during the daytime, but obviously we're more than happy to work around members. And from my personal experience, it is a really beneficial meeting with members of Unison and the staff forum, and you do get a lot over and achieve a lot. So can I ask for anybody who would like to join? So we need 3 councillors. Yep, so we've got Councillor Woolridge.
Can I, there's another issue I just want to raise,
Okay.
actually. I had my hand up in the minutes.
Oh, sorry.
No, it's fine. I would like to put myself forward for this as well. So that's,
Okay.
thank you. So, but also in addition to that, I know the minutes of the last meeting were only for accuracy, and I can't, comment on that really because I wasn't here, apart from the minutes. But what I would say is the minutes mention about Unison attending this meeting. And it makes absolute sense that they should attend. A lot of these papers are to do with Unison. So I would say, can they be invited to future meetings? And, people's thoughts on that. I would have, there isn't a matters arising, otherwise I'd raise it under matters arising, but I don't see any other appropriate place to mention that. So I hope you don't mind me raising that.
Completely agree with you. And they have been invited to this evening's meeting.
Is that going to be as a matter of course for every meeting going forward?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Yeah,
okay. Absolutely. And it'd be a lot easier as well. We're in the committee room, they can come up, and if they want any matters to raise, we can have that conversation with them.
Will that be their secretary, or is that whoever they decide to send?
So the secretary, and then their nominated leader as well.
Right. Thank you for that.
But they are more than welcome, and I do encourage them to attend.
Brilliant. Thank you, Laura. That's excellent. Thank you.
Councillor Harvey, your hand raised there.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, if you're looking for another nominee, I'm happy to put my name forward.
Perfect. Thank you. We need one more. No, that's fine. Okay, so what we'll do, we'll put these names forward, we'll form the committee, and then if anybody would like to join at a later date, then please feel free to do so.
Would you look at members from outside the committee only, or only on the committee?
I think you have to be on the committee. I think that's in the constitution, but I'll double check that. That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
Just to say, Councillor Edwards, I'm happy to sit on this. I'm not sure if you saw my hand at all.
Oh, sorry, no, I can't see your hand. I don't know if it's my computer having a moment. Councillor McKay, I've just noted your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just going to ask how many meetings per year there are, because my hesitancy is around getting time off work.
Okay, I think it used to be 2, but they could become more frequent depending on what the staff members would like to discuss. So, I mean, if we put Councillor Carr down, and then if you sort of interchange.
I'm happy to leave out if you have the required numbers. I just thought for a moment you might not have the numbers, in which case I'd have been happy to try and help.
Thank you. No, thank you. Councillor Harvey. Sorry, you're on mute.
Sorry, Laura. Sorry, Chair. If it helps, John, if you want to attend a particular one, John, I'm happy to drop off for that meeting. We share it between the two of us if that helps.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. Okay, perfect. Okay, so I think if we move on to item 7, so that's the annual review of the health and safety report. So we've got Paul Beaumont, who's come to present it. So welcome back, Paul. It's always nice to see you at the committees. So what we'll do, listen to Paul's report and then questions to officers, and then we can go into debate. And we've been asked to note the report. So over to you, Paul.
Thank you, Chair, and fellow members present. I present to the committee the annual report detailing the health and standards and progress that the 2 health and safety committees at Basingstoke and Dean have achieved. Those committees are the Body Corporate and the Operations Street Scene Committee. Each of the committee refines the safety related policies and procedures that we have in place, together with our safe systems of work, our risk assessments, the safety training we provide, and indeed our annual safety improvement plan that's in the report. These management tools enrich the council's sensible management approach to provide a safe place to work for our employees, but also to protect other persons, such as the public, as we carry out our work activities. The coronavirus pandemic introduced a further challenge to protect our workforce and those other persons, and we quickly mobilised our crews to deliver vital services compliant to COVID-19. Some staff were self-isolating and others were sent home en masse, complete with laptops, desks, chairs and operating as home workers. We provided effective communications to our staff to heed the face, the hands, social distancing measures promoted by government and public health bodies. We used the CX, the Chief Executive briefings, MS Teams, Zoom, like this one, Chair, question and answer sessions with our staff, buddy systems, quizzes, to ensure the staff well-being, social interaction, and to deter loneliness and isolation. We today continue to disinfect our touch points and our vehicles and our office equipment where staff have come into work for operational or personal reasons. And we've maintained safety skills training, for example, first aid, sharps training, dealing with conflict. We've held each safety committee meeting. They meet quarterly, and our violence at work meetings as well, and they're held bi-monthly. The council has robust systems and procedures in place to prevent serious injury, ill health, whether those work activities are performed by ourselves or indeed our contracting agents. Even through COVID, our accident rate has reduced significantly, and COVID-19, I could personally suggest, has possibly focused the mind to take even more preventative care of oneself. In the closing stages of the report, I've shown the Safety Committee's new and projected action plan for 2021 and 2022, and therefore I would ask this committee to note the contents of the report and to work alongside us as we make this journey of continuous improvement at Basingstoke and Dean.
Okay, thank you, Paul. So we've got any questions on the report? Councillor McKay?
Yes, can you hear me okay? I think I've unmuted.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Thanks for the report, and I certainly note that the continuous improvement. I just had one question, really. It's nice to see that the number of RIDDOR reportable accidents is reduced from 6 to 3, but I just wondered if a little bit of information as to the nature of the RIDDOR accidents in the reporting year. I think it'd be helpful to know that, given that the threshold for reporting is set reasonably high.
Sorry, Councillor, I was on mute, forgive me. We actually had 2 real-life slips and trips and falls, RIDDOR reports the HSE, and then we had one that the HSE make it abundantly clear that it has to be work-related, and you have to be taken to the hospital as a direct consequence. And that wasn't the case. However, we did make a phone call to the HSE, and we did say, as a precautionary measure, we would report the last one. And so we did. So on the report, there it's shown 3, but in reality and in real life, it was 2. RIDDOR capacity.
Yep, thanks very much. That's made things much clearer, and I congratulate the attitude that if in doubt, you contact the HSE. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Waldbridge.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the report as well. I've got sort of 3 questions, or one specific question. Firstly, I noted that generally there's a downward trend in the appendix, apart from muscular strain, where that seems to have gone up a bit. And I just wondered if there's any analysis done on whether that's to do with sort of people working from home and not having desks set up properly and such like, repetitive strain injuries through that sort of thing, and or whether it's just a coincidence that that's gone up. So firstly, that's my first question. My second question is, because I'm new to the committee, I'm not aware of the full range of reports that we'll get throughout the year. But I note that this paper doesn't sort of mention anything to do with mental health and the recording of mental health here. Maybe that will be a future paper and it will all be covered, but I'm a little concerned it doesn't cover mental health recording and KPIs with regard to mental health. So just some clarification on that, please. And then my third question is, have Unison's views been sought on this, and what was their views on the report? Have they had a chance to comment on it? So, you know, and if so, what were the feedback you got from Unison? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Question 1, MSD, that's musculoskeletal disorders, and that's bones, that's vertebrae, that's joints, that's tendons, ligaments. It's a wonderful catalogue if we're trying to find the root causes of incidents. Most people think it's back related, but it isn't always the case. And repetitive strain injuries are a classic example. And even hand-arm vibration can hinge on that element as well. We, as a precaution, we try to look at every particular example. I can give you one example. I mean, I can, if we had more time today, I could run through the whole analysis with you, and I'm more than happy to send it to you. But we actually had an employee that had a problem with one of his wrists, and we had a new vehicle, fully regulated, satisfied Thatcham Research Centre. And he found that the gate device on the back of the vehicle was so stiff, and he had major problems. We actually varied him on different trucks until he built up a little bit more strength. But we did take it up to the manufacturer and said, look, could we change this? But of course they said, but this is world standard. So we've done everything we can to help and support that employee. It's something that's close to my heart, and it's something that we do vigorously attempt to provide better preventative care for our staff. Mental health is part of the sickness report, councillor. So that is a separate report.
Okay.
Unison do work alongside us. They belong to both of our committees. I also meet with the head of HR and Unison because we like to give them not just a quarterly review, we like to give them a more regular review as well. But can I stress that safety representatives, by their sheer nature, are there to represent their workforce, and we involve them in our safety inspections and our excellent reports as well. So there is a definite connection there, and we respect their comments, their views, and they're quite useful as well sometimes because you can see the wood for the trees, and they come up with some good solutions for us as well. It's a working methodology, and it's a good working atmosphere.
Yeah, no, well, thanks for your comprehensive answers. If I could just follow up on a couple of them. The first one, it was a really good example you gave me there, but I would, you know, has an analysis been done about people who are working from home and possible sort of strain injuries with regard to, as you clearly said, it's not the back, it often is the wrist and things, and it could be through using a computer at the wrong level. And so I just wondered whether, you know, it could be a problem we're storing up for the future if a lot of, you know, employees are working from home without desks and without desks properly set up for them as well. So just a thought really, and what analysis has been done, and if not, is it something you might plan to do in the future? And then in terms of Unison, you know, I'm sure you do work with Unison, and it's good that you do, but it would be quite nice as a councillor to see some of their comments and views in the report, because it will give a more holistic sort of overview of the report. That's all I'd say, but thank you very much.
Okay. I would like to support that view, and I'm confident, councillor, we will record their views in the successive reports. Incidentally, home workers, we've only had one incident, and that was electric shock. But we've the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors have given the HSE guidance, which we circulated to our employees, about the use of cushions, pillows, ironing boards as a rise and fall desk, We've shared that with our employees. We've offered our office chairs. In fact, I've got one at home myself from the council. So the ergonomics generally are pretty good. I think what we've asked employees that if you're home with your family and there's 5 of you around the dining room table, then quite clearly that would not be acceptable. So we've tried to provide little stands and devices that our staff can use.
Okay.
The ergonomics is critical. So
yeah, and have all employees been done DSE sort of assessments from their home working environment, or at least been encouraged to do so?
Indeed, we provide DSE assessments for the office and at home.
Okay, all right, thank you.
I think we've got Sarah wanting to come in.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Just really to add to what Paul was saying, we did introduce a specific DSE assessment for home working and develop some specific training to support that. So it covered everything in terms of standard DSE, so setup of the equipment, etc. Through that, it was identified where staff had particular needs, and obviously because we were doing the refurbishment in Deans, we were able to offer desks, etc., as well as all of the standard chair, laptop, mouse, keyboard, etc. But in addition, we did a further element of the DSE assessment around the mental health side of working from home. So we tried to do a sort of comprehensive assessment to support staff through that process.
Thank you for that. That's great.
Thank you. Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you. Excellent report. I just have one thing to note. Home worker safety. Now, obviously, a number of staff have been working late at night in Parklands before they go back to Deans. Has everybody ensured that they understand the protocols for home working? Maybe that's for you, Sarah.
Sorry, Councillor Rattigan, can you just clarify when you mean the sort of protocols for home working, what you're referring to?
I'm not talking about home working. I'm talking about lone worker safety when they are alone in a building, obviously with a lot of staff not coming in. A number of people work late. I've seen them myself. I just want to make sure that you've only noted enforcement officers on this piece of evidence or this piece of work. I just want to make sure that the protocol has gone out to everybody who might be working late within the offices.
Apologies, thank you. Yes, so absolutely our key lone worker procedures remain in place as they did before COVID. But yes, we continue to have on-site presence from our FM team, which covers beyond our sort of normal office hours. And if there are occasions where staff are working beyond those, then yes, we do have those procedures in place. And I am confident staff are aware, but obviously it's important we periodically remind staff of those.
Any further questions on this agenda report? No.
I've got one more. Sorry, if you don't mind me asking one more.
No, ask away, honestly.
Yeah, thank you. The report includes information about lone worker safety and the devices that you've used for that. I just wondered, can you tell me a bit more about the devices? Do they record the GIS location, for example, and do they have if you sort of fall down and do they sort of come across as man down and go through to the police? Just wondered how comprehensive they actually are.
Councillor, we have SkyGuard devices that have the man down facility indeed, and they do have the GIS tracking system, and they've sent her through to Edinburgh Monitoring Station. We've got the cascading of family alerts, manager alerts, and of course the emergency services as well. It's an ex-military tested system. I'm familiar with that at another local authority, and we do have some activations, and our dog wardens included. We've got environmental health, we've got planning, we've got revs and bends. It's a pretty holistic approach, and it's really good.
Thank you.
So we've been asked to note the report, but I think especially following Councillor Woolridge's comment, So I think if we could put on there just for a recommendation is for just to have a note to say that Unison have received the report and if they've got any comments on there. And I think as we continue to have staff working from home, if we could have maybe a separate column to see if they've got any muscular or strain injuries from working at home, just so we can sort of determine between the two. Okay, so we're all agreed to note the report. Yeah, okay, brilliant. Okay, so agenda item 8 is the annual review of policies. So we've got Sarah to introduce the report, and it's just to review the delegation to officers to agree all the employment policies. So Sarah can present and then we can ask her any questions that we may have.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards, and apologies for not doing this previously, but good evening everyone, and for those of you I haven't met, my name's Sarah Cragg and I'm our Head of HR, Communications and Policy at the Council. So just in terms of picking out a couple of highlights from this report, so for those of you who may not have been on HR committee before, this is an annual report that comes in front of the committee as set out in the Constitution. And essentially, currently, there are 10 policies listed in the Constitution which come before the committee. And those are the ones that particularly either have a financial impact for the organisation or particularly significant staff impact. And there's a further function within that for the HR committee just to review whether there are any other policies they would like to request come before the committee. And that's a sort of annual review. So this is that standard annual review. The other bit I wanted to draw your attention to is just around the scheduling of policies in future. This is something that we've discussed previously at the committee, that because the committee is twice yearly, there is a risk that we have a significant number of policies coming to the committee in one go, which can then make it difficult in terms of doing any other business within the committee. So as part of this paper, it's proposed to reset some of the dates on which the committee will review the policies to spread them across the committee calendar. In addition to that, a number of the policies will need to be updated to reflect the introduction of our new HR, payroll and finance enterprise resource system, ERP system, in April 2022. And I'll talk a little bit more about that system in a later paper. But that's currently being built and moving into a testing phase. So we will need to update a number of policies because some of our processes and procedures will change as a result of having that new system. So as such, I've proposed some revised dates which are set out in the table within the report. And obviously just to confirm that where the dates have been revised, all of our current policies are operationally workable and obviously compliant with the relevant legislation. So there aren't sort of concerns in terms of the dates being revised. Also to note, in addition to the policies that are listed within the Constitution, a further policy was previously submitted to the committee for approval, which is the Chief Officer Disciplinary Procedures and Guidance, and that's proposed to be reviewed in March 2022. Also, just to note that a number of our employment policies have been amended as a result of our Smarter Ways of Working programme, in addition to measures as part of the Climate Emergency Declaration. So because of those two programmes and events, we will need to do a review of some of our council approaches to things like home working, flexible working and staff travel. So the draft policies are currently being reviewed by the senior officers and will then be shared with Unison. And if there are any revisions which require approval by the committee, then obviously those will come before the committee as well. Thank you, Councillor Edwards.
Okay, thank you. So as you can see on the report paper, we've got two options. So the first one is if we wish to recommend there to be any amendments to the delegations to officers for certain employment policies not listed in section 2 of this report, but is outlined in section 3.3. or whether the HR committee are in agreement with the amended review timetable for the policies to ensure that these can be timed across the scheduled committees as outlined in section 4.2 of the report. So I think if we take any questions in the report and then we can look at the two options. Any questions? Councillor Waldridge?
So sorry, I seem to be speaking a bit too much now.
No.
Well, it's sounding a bit like a broken record here now, but going to section 4.6 of the report, page 35, and responding to what Sarah said about shared with Unison. Again, I would be interested to know that what Unison's comments were. So, you know, if they're shared with Unison is one thing, but to share something with somebody is one thing, but you want to actually get their feedback and to know what the feedback is, and for Unison to be able to comment in a timely way and consult with their members and get their views as well. So I guess what we're suggesting is that, you know, any policies that are changed or out for consultation, especially bearing in mind that a lot will do because of home working and everything else, that they're done in a timely way, at least sort of maybe 4 or 6 weeks before that, and that which allows Unison the chance to consult with their members for feedback to come in. That then is fed into the report, and you know, may be accepted, may not be accepted, but and then we know what that feedback was when we look at these new policies. That it would be really helpful to have that, in my opinion. But in terms of the scheduling, you know, completely agree. It makes sense to space them out. Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. So I'm happy with that. You know, what's been suggested tonight, with the addition that Unison are properly consulted and their feedback shared with us as councillors where appropriate.
I think they are consulted, correct me if I'm wrong, Sarah, but I see what you're saying, Hane, so we're not seeing their feedback, it's just discussions have been had.
What the report says is in here, these draft policies are currently being reviewed by senior management and before being shared with Unison. Yeah. So that word share isn't the right word for me. I would like Unison are consulted and that their comments are taken into account and it's recorded if we can.
Sarah?
Yeah, just to come back on that, absolutely. And apologies, happy to kind of change that word for future reference. But yes, it is consulting rather than sharing. So the policies I'm currently working through a different policy with them at the moment. So they received a draft of the policy. They came back with a number of questions and requests for the policy to be changed. We are now updating that policy. So it is a process sort of back and forth between us. It's not just sharing, it is asking for comments, asking for their views, reviewing what their kind of comments and requests are, and then updating the policy. So yes, it is that kind of back and forth consultation process.
And from what you said, it's done in a timely way, and you know, it's not just a last minute thing. It allows them to consult with their members as well. Yeah.
And we would obviously want to make sure that they have it in enough time so that they can review the policies before they come to yourselves. And absolutely, I note the point that you would like to know what their views are when the committee are also considering policies, and I absolutely take that point.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any further questions on that paper? Okay, so I'm assuming then from the silence we are in agreement with the two, well, sort of recommendations, even though it's noted in the report. So there's delegated to officers, and that we are in agreement with the timetable as well. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay, so item number 9, which is the HR operations and workforce update. So this includes the sick leave, the reasons for sick leave, and it's a little bit more on the well-being and mental health side rather than just the physical health and safety. So can I just pass over to Sarah to present the report?
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. With your permission, what I'll do with this report, because it is quite a lengthy one, is what I normally do. So I'll take it sort of a couple of sections at a time so we can review and take any questions, because there's an awful lot of information in there, and obviously want to make sure that you've got the opportunity to ask questions if you wish to. So in terms of a general sort of summary of the report, this is our kind of key day-to-day HR activity report, for want of a better phrase. So this is really the kind of key management information we have across the HR sphere that we're sharing with you. So in terms of the first sort of couple of key areas, so looking at establishment and turnover, so you'll see Broadly, the figures are relatively static, with the exception, as noted in the report, that we've obviously had a number of staff cheaply transfer into the organisation from Hart, which is as part of the waste service, which I'm sure you're aware of. In terms of our general employment, so as was noted in the last committee around the gender pay gap report, broadly equal numbers of men and women, although we have seen a shift towards part-time working, and that may be something that we actually see increasing in the coming years as part of a more sort of flexible skills and working environment. In terms of our leavers, and most of this data is related to the whole of the last financial year, we did see a decrease in our number of leavers. Clearly, this is likely to have been impacted by COVID-19, so I would be hesitant to draw any long-ranging conclusions from that data. But we did see a reduction in, as I say, the number of leavers last year. Generally, we didn't pick any particular trends out in terms of either where those individuals were leaving from or in terms of their length of service or their grade. So there was nothing particular that we sort of felt of concern amongst those, although obviously it's important to note that we do offer exit questionnaires and exit interviews as well if required with all of our leavers. So we do want to make sure that we have the opportunity to gather any feedback from our leavers around their experience of working within the organisation. And from those who did complete those questionnaires, obviously we've had some positive feedback around the organisation and around their roles, although we obviously take on board any thing that they inform us of that can help us improve the employment experience for colleagues who remain employed by us. In terms of sickness absence, which we've already alluded to as a general topic area, similarly to the number of leavers, we did see a reduction in our sickness absence rates during the last financial year. Again, it is likely that that is related to COVID-19, and that does reflect a trend mirrored sort of across the UK. There are potentially a number of reasons for that. Clearly, with people interacting less with each other, standard cough, colds, flus, and other potentially transmissible diseases are likely to have been less easy to transmit. And also, it may be that if staff potentially felt or would have felt unwell to come into the office, but they maybe were able to undertake work at home. However, it is important to note that we have continued to emphasise to all of our staff that even if they are working at home, if they're too unwell to work, then they shouldn't be working. So we have continued to encourage staff with those sort of positive wellbeing messages. In terms of our reasons for sickness absence, and we've already alluded to this, similarly reflecting the national picture, mental health related absence continues to be the most prevalent cause of sickness absence across the organisation, although it did see an overall reduction as all of our sickness absence did. I'll talk a little bit later on in the report around the support that we offer for staff generally around their wellbeing, but particularly in relation to mental health. But rest assured, this is something that's always high on our priority list, and we're very keen to support staff, whether that's mental health absence related to work or related to life outside of work, or both. It's a really important function of our service to support staff who are in that position. I'm conscious those are two quite big areas. So are there any particular questions around general workforce statistics or sickness absence before I move on?
No.
Okay, happy to come back to anything at the end if there is anything else. In terms of gender pay gap, that's noted in the report. Obviously, we talked about that last time, so I wasn't proposing to go through that again. But just in terms of the positive news story that we have, if you like, in our gender pay gap and how well our workforce is recompensed. So just to note that. In terms of our ethnicity breakdown, this has remained largely unchanged, but clearly it's an area that we continue to focus on, not only in terms of our ethnicity breakdown, but around all of our protected characteristics and more widely trying to increase the inclusivity within our workforce. And we've got a number of initiatives around that, and I'll talk a little bit about apprenticeships and the Kickstart scheme later on, which links into that. It's important, and I don't think we could do an HR workforce report without talking about COVID-19. For the last couple of committees, we've provided an update. So in terms of what's changed from last time, We've obviously continued to support staff, both those who have been coming into work either in the office or in the community, and those who have been working from home. In line with the government guidance, we have started a gradual return to office, which ran during August, and the ground floor of the Dean's building has now reopened, and Parklands has been split into areas, so each team has their own zone that they're able to then work in, and the desks can be shared amongst the team, and local managers are able to work with their teams in terms of who's coming in and when to work between them. At the time of writing the report, social distancing remained in place and is currently in place within the offices. And as indicated within the report, this has been recently reviewed by our strategic emergency management team. And we are reviewing our risk assessments around that in terms of moving forward so that we can, in line with industry across the country, start to encourage more of our staff to come back into the office. And face coverings has remained a matter of personal choice, but we have retained all of our other on-site precautions, which Paul already alluded to. So our use of hand sanitizer, our cleaning of workstations, etc. So really important to continue to do everything we can to keep our staff safe. In terms of health and wellbeing, as I've already mentioned, all staff wellbeing is important, but clearly mental health, because of the impact that it can have for individuals, but also because it is our highest cause of sickness absence, remains a real focus for us. And just as a reminder, really, in terms of the range of support we can offer, we do have face-to-face counselling, albeit some of that has been operating virtually during COVID-19, but clearly that's been due to the counselling service and how they've been able to operate. We also have a 24/7 employee assistance programme, which offers counselling and wellbeing training, a really well regarded occupational health service, and a number of our staff who act as mental health champions, so that there's a number of routes for people to access support. In addition to that, we've done a number of specific wellbeing activities during the pandemic to try and support staff. So regular newsletters to our colleagues in parks and street scene operations, because we're mindful that a number of them may not necessarily be able to regularly access information on our SharePoint site. We've done lots of wellbeing advice and information circulated via our chief executive briefings and updates. In addition to that, I ran a staff briefing last month, which focused solely on staff wellbeing, and this was a sort of recorded bite-sized development session that staff were able to access at any point, because in August, obviously with people on leave, it was important that people were able to access them at any point, and that's still available for staff. We're also currently developing sessions for managers to support them in working in a hybrid way with staff, and wellbeing is a big part of that session. And in addition, we ran virtual wellbeing sessions for all staff. We're also currently delivering in-house a suicide first aid course. It's obviously a very difficult topic for people, but a really important one that we continue to talk about. So really keen to equip staff and managers to support colleagues and potentially residents and others that they may come across in their work or their home lives if there are any signs of people displaying suicidal thoughts. So a whole suite of information and support that we're keen to offer to staff. And you'll see also in the report a number of activities that we have coming in the coming months to continue to do that focused work. So wellbeing remains a key part of the work that we do. I'll pause at that point, because again, I've covered a number of sections if there's any particular questions.
Chair, may I?
Sorry, I was just stuck on mute there. Councillor Mellor.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, and apologies. This is my first HR committee meeting. In fact, I've only been with the borough for 4 months. So apologies if I'm talking a little bit out of turn. Very keen on the item contained under 3.7, where you show the amount of apprentices, or those to grade 3, being 2.6 of the total workforce, which in fact is above the government requirement of 2.3%, yet we've got 33% leaving. Are these indentured apprentices, or is this just a total figure wrapped up with all the other staff who are working up to grade 3?
Thank you for your question. And I know it's a very helpful question. So just to confirm, that is apprentices to grade 3. So that does include staff in addition to our apprentices. So we do have a number of staff within that area, particularly a number of staff within our operations team. So that doesn't reflect that all of our apprentices are leaving before the end of their apprenticeship contract. But obviously it's also important to reflect that the apprenticeship contract is a fixed term one. A number of our apprentices are sort of converted, if you like, and do join us on a permanent basis, which is fantastic. But also a number of them choose not to because they go on to further education or other development elsewhere. So that our apprenticeships are very much a stepping stone. As I say, we're very keen to retain our apprentices where that's feasible and where that is sort of works for them as well. But a number of them do go on to, as I say, do further education or other development opportunities.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Aldridge.
Thank you. A couple of comments and then a couple of questions. I mean, in terms of the work you're doing on mental health, like, you know, it's obviously, you know, you're doing a lot and it's very positive to see it. So thank you for that. Just a couple of questions. Firstly, in terms of the exit service that are done when staff leave, it's not clear to me on the report, and again, this may have been raised before, if those are anonymous for the people filling them in, because a lot of people may leave to go on to related to other local authorities who they're going to work closely with, or in the future, or related, you know, sort of agencies. So you might not fill it in honestly, and unless they know it's going to be anonymous. So I just like, you know, some reassurances, I suppose, that it is anonymous, because there is a comment about it being shared with managers when you know, there is some improvement work that needs doing or whatever. So just some clarification on that, please. And then the other question I had was in terms of the redundancy in the first quarter of this year, quarter 1 of 2021 to 22, there's been 3 people made redundant. Now, I just wondered what support the council had given them to find other work, or, you know, just reassurances about what support they're getting really to get other work if that's what they're looking to do. So thank you.
Thank you very much for both of those questions. So in terms of the redundancies, absolutely, and I'm sure you may have seen in terms of our redundancy policy that is always set up as being a last resort, for want of a better phrase. So we do always work with our staff in terms of seeking alternative employment within the organisation, as well as offering other support in terms of helping them to find employment outside. There are occasions where individuals are in a position where maybe they don't want to seek alternative employment following redundancy because of where they are in their careers. So we do try and support people wherever they are kind of in their career journey and what they're looking for moving on from when they are at risk of redundancy. So yes, we do try and support staff throughout that sort of redundancy process, if you like. And my apologies, can you just repeat your second question?
The other question was about how anonymous the exit service was.
Apologies, thank you.
No, it's fine.
So they aren't anonymous in as much as they do come back to the HR team, because obviously it's helpful for us to know where the feedback is coming from. They aren't shared wholesale beyond that, but obviously if we do get an indication from those that there's a particular concern in relation to a particular service area or a particular business unit, then obviously we look at how we can provide additional support in that area. So it won't necessarily be going back and saying somebody said comments A, B, C and D, but if we have an indication there's a particular concern in an area and we'd sort of triangulate that with other information that we have about different areas, then we would use that information. Having said that, clearly if there was anything, and and there wasn't as part of this report, but if there was anything that came up in there that was of grave concern, then obviously we would work with that member of staff around how we might sort of work through that with them and with the surface area. But if we were ever getting to the point of sharing lots of information, then we would discuss that with that member of staff, so that we're sort of seeking their permission to share it back with the service area.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I can't see any other questions. I'd just like to mention the exit interviews. A couple of years ago, we did look at the process on it and made sure that everybody who leaves the council is offered one. So we have put a large emphasis on that. Okay, so I think, are we all okay to note the report?
Apologies, Chair, there were just a couple more bits for me to quickly pull out, if you don't mind. No, that's okay, if that's okay. So just quickly referencing in terms of our apprenticeships and our Kickstart scheme. So as I alluded to earlier on, there's still a big focus on our apprenticeships. We've recently recruited to some apprenticeship posts, and we are currently recruiting to a number of them as well. This is both in terms of apprenticeships for new staff joining us, but also exploring how we can use apprenticeships for existing staff, because they can be a really helpful development tool for both current staff and new staff. So we continue to work with managers to look at all of our vacancies and to see which may be appropriate to recruit to under an apprenticeship. So that remains a really important focus for us. In addition to that, we were also really keen to support the Kickstart programme that the government launched as part of COVID-19, which I'm sure you're aware is really focusing on creating work placements for those who are 16 to 24 who are on universal credit. And we've provided 3 placements so far and another 4 further roles pending. So again, that's one of the areas where we look at in terms of our younger workforce, where maybe we'd want to have increased numbers in that age group. So it's one of our particular targeted activities around that. And finally, just in terms of our new ERP system, as I mentioned earlier on, this is coming in April 2022 and will replace a number of current systems that we have across those areas. So we'll have a single system housing data and information across all of those functions. We're currently moving into the testing phase around that. And in advance of that, we've launched a standalone recruitment module, which will really help us to streamline the recruitment process and make it easier both for candidates and also for managers who are recruiting. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Mackay, I've got a question.
Yeah, a couple of questions, and Sarah's actually part answered the first one. I suppose I was looking for assurances about the number of apprenticeships that are within the council, because actually we're not meeting the target at the moment, and as it's reported, you're moving positively towards it. So question one is, what sort of time frame might we expect to see that target before that target's met? My second question goes back to the earlier part of the report, where in 2021 we're reporting no redundancies. And it might be that in Appendix 10 the answer comes, but there are redundancy costs in the same report year. And I wanted just an explanation as to why that would be. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, I mean, I did allude to apprenticeships. So it's very difficult to give a specific time frame in terms of when we expect to hit the target, because obviously, as you can appreciate, with COVID, things have become challenging in terms of moving towards that. But yes, I can absolutely assure you that we are continuing to focus on our apprenticeships. Where the apprenticeships are getting longer, that does make it more challenging, because actually it's measured on the number of new apprenticeships rather than those that are ongoing. But yes, that is something that we are continuing to focus on, and we will continue to focus on in terms of that time frame. And then just to take on board your other point around the redundancies. So let me pick that up. Okay, I'll need to pick that one up and look into that one. I'll need to come back to you on that, because yeah, I do need to pick that one up, because those should be tying in. So apologies for that. I'll have a look at that one, moving on to the other report, and then hopefully pick that up in terms of the terminations report.
Okay, so I think that sorry, Councillor Mackay, sorry, about the redundancies. Are you happy for us to move on to the termination costs?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Sarah, is it? I think we've covered the paper now.
Yes, that was everything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So so I think if we all agree to note it, and then we lead nicely on to item 10, which is the termination costs. And again, we've been asked to note the report, and we've got Sarah coming back to present it. So a lot of papers from her today.
Thank you, Chair. So just for the benefit of those who may not have been involved with the committee before, similarly to the policies report, this is a standard report that comes to the committee once a year as part of what's set out in the Constitution in terms of what the committee receives. So again, just really by way of a reminder, settlement agreements and termination payments more widely are covered by our pay policy statement, which also comes to the committee yearly in end of February/early March. And in line with that pay policy statement, any settlement agreements that are made are approved by our Head of Law and Governance or Monitoring Officer, as well as myself and the Executive Director of Corporate Services, who's also our Section 151 officer. And in addition, in line with that statement, Council receive details on any packages over £100,000 before they're requested to approve. So just in terms of the detail, the Council paid employment termination costs totalling £54,193.35 in 2020-2021. And you've got the figure for the previous year there, which is just over 68,000. So in terms of the detail of those costs for last year, that's comprised of £5,680.35 in redundancy costs, 19,000 or 19,610 was related to settlement agreement payments, and that excludes payments for pile-on, which is pay in lieu of notice. And then you've got the figure there for the pay in lieu of notice payments, and in terms of the early retirement costs. Also to make the point that the early retirement costs are not costs that are made in isolation, they would be linked to redundancy costs. So as I alluded to earlier, if an individual who is being made redundant is potentially of the age where they would fall into the category of early retirement, then that can be an associated cost with that redundancy. So just to be clear, those two are linked in terms of figures. And this is why I wanted to move to this report before I answered Councillor McKay's question. So that redundancy payment is, there's a sort of slight gap between when the redundancy payment is made versus when the individual leaves the organisation. So that was the payment, if you like, was made within that year. And apologies, that should have been reflected in the report in terms of matching up. But as I say, they were pulled from slightly different data sources. But this is correct in terms of when that payment was made to that individual. So apologies for any confusion that arose there.
Okay, we've got any questions on the termination costs? No. Good. Okay, so again, we're all okay to note the report. Okay. Right, so on items 11 and 12, there's a lot going on in the council, as we're well aware. There's lots of changes going on. So thought better then, because there's no formal updates as such, Sarah's kindly offered to do some verbal updates, just so we're up to speed with everything that's going on, and then we can ask any questions as well. So Sarah, are you okay to give us a verbal update on item 11, which is the pay and benefits review?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Edwards. So again, conscious that a number of you may not have been directly involved with this before, so just thought it was worth doing it, a bit of a reminder really as to where we are and what the plan is moving forward. So in terms of our pay and benefits review, this is designed to make sure we've got a pay and reward structure which can respond to the market that we're operating in and particular skills shortages as well as being fair and transparent, but also robust enough to comply with our equal pay legislation. And in addition, it looks at the wider structure in terms of spans of control across the organisation to make sure that we've got the structure that we need to deliver our services to our residents and our local community. So there are 4 work streams within the pay and benefits review. One is about introducing a new job evaluation system. A second is reviewing our current roles in line with that system. Thirdly, it's reviewing our benefits package, including pay benchmarking across the organisation. And also fourthly, the spans of control. So that's the sort of management layers within the organisation in terms of how many staff we have reporting to someone reporting up through the line. And those 4 work streams obviously be underpinned by a review of the relevant policies where changes are made. So as we've already mentioned previously at the committee, the main focus of the review currently is around the job evaluation system, which, as we've previously discussed, we're introducing the Corn Ferry Hay system. So for anyone not familiar with that system, it's extensively used and a robust JE system that's been used worldwide as well as within local authorities. So that basically will review jobs against a number of factors. So the inputs required to the job, so what you need to know and what skills and capabilities you need to have to do it, how you process those to achieve your results and what outputs or results are expected from the role. And that's how they're reviewed. So a key principle of the process for us was that we had a system that was sustainable. So rather than having someone come in and do the piece of work for us, that we actually trained our staff internally so that we could continue successfully using the new system way into the future. So we trained an initial cohort of 10 evaluators in how the new system operates, and they've been working through practice evaluations to get them up to speed with how the system works. So following detailed scoping work, there are a small number of job descriptions where we need to make some updates, and that's in relation to where there have been significant changes in roles in the sort of last year to 18 months since we've been moving forward with this process. But otherwise, the job descriptions are moving forward and will be reviewed by our internal evaluators. They'll also be quality checked by Corn Ferry because we're very keen to assure staff that a robust process is being followed to determine the relative grading of roles across the council. Once the roles have been benchmarked against each other in terms of where they sit on a matrix, we'll then be doing some detailed pay modelling to look at what options we have for future pay and grading structures. So that's the job evaluation part of the process. We're also looking at benefits and rewards. So that's the wider sort of package of things that we offer outside of basic pay to establish ourselves as an employer of choice within the local community, but also beyond. So Corn Ferry will be working with our executive directors and chief exec initially around what the principles of that reward strategy might look like. Then we're very keen to engage with staff across the organisation to understand what their views are around our current benefits package and which they think are most beneficial and which are most important to them, so that we can focus on really making sure we have a package that helps us attract and retain the staff that we need to deliver our valuable services. So in addition to that piece of work around the benefits and the outputs from the job evaluation system, those two combined will enable us to create a new pay and benefit system. And the output of that really is for us to position ourselves as an employer of choice. And as I say, make sure we can attract and retain the staff that we need to deliver the many ambitious things that are on our agenda to deliver. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask Sarah, in terms of the positioning of the council in the review and how we've gone forward, are we still positioning ourselves to recruit, as it were, from the upper quartile? We're looking at really are recruiting the very best in that sense, the organisation from that perspective. Are we still looking at this review resulting in that? Or have we changed that particular principle as a part of the review?
So that hasn't been changed at this stage. So currently, as is reflected in our pay policy statement, the current position is paying in terms of the upper quartile, but that will be part of the pay modelling that we will do as part of this process. So that hasn't been determined at this stage. The first bit of the process really is to determine where roles sit in relation to each other in terms of the knowledge, the know-how and the elements I've talked about. And then the secondary piece of work that will link into that will be around that wider pay modelling so that we can really understand what upper quartile means in the current climate what that looks like and actually how we balance what we pay against the other benefits package, because obviously what we're looking to provide is a full rounded package, if you like. So we want to understand both from staff what's important to them, but also with support from Corn Ferry, understanding where the market is around pay so that we can look at where we need to position ourselves. So that will be a discussion to come as part of this process.
And will members and the HR committee be involved in that, or will that be purely an officer reflection?
So in terms of the pay policy statement, as I've already alluded to, that is something that comes to HR committee, and that's part of that process to do that, and that would be included within that pay policy statement, because that is a part of our approach, if you like. So that would need to form part of that.
Thank you. Councillor Waldridge.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, well, a couple of questions really, but the main one focuses on timescales, because there's no timescales involved in this report, and you sort of mentioned already that, you know, some of the job descriptions are, you know, coming across as out of date and being updated, and people, I might open up, putting words into your mouth, and are now doing jobs which are over and above what their original job description said. In which cases, if it is going to take a while to do this piece of work, which I understand it may do, if given that people are now working from home, there's different roles, if it's established that people, you know, are working at a higher skills level than what they previously would be, is there any backdating going to be done for those employees? And so I suppose I want to know a little bit about timescales, how quickly this piece of work is going to be done. And then about if there is a delay because there is a lot of jobs to reevaluate, will there be any backdated for those who are clearly sort of now working at a higher level than their original job description said? So those are my two questions at the moment, please.
Thank you. So in terms of the job descriptions being updated, I think it's important to kind of emphasise that that's the sort of minority of the job descriptions that we have. So managers and staff actually were able to submit roles to our previous job evaluation system, which was K-Plan. So it is really those that have changed in the sort of more recent past. So for example, that may be as a result of things such as the climate change emergency, which wouldn't necessarily have been predominantly within someone's job a number of years ago, but obviously, you know, as things change. So it really is sort of key significant changes like that. Obviously, that doesn't necessarily mean that that's a different grade. It may be a different emphasis in terms of the role, but obviously that's part of what we need to look at in terms of what that might mean around grading, and then that will go through the process of being considered. In terms of the length of time that will take, obviously, as you can imagine, we're very keen to try and balance doing this quickly, because it's important that staff are aware this is happening. It's potentially unsettling for them, as any big change programme is. So we want to do it as quickly as we can, but also it's important that it's done robustly and that staff can have faith in the process that's being followed, hence having the internal evaluators and the sort of secondary quality assurance. So there is a process of running through the evaluations, then looking at what that pay modelling needs to look like, and then an appropriate consultation with staff. But obviously we'd be very keen to move forward into the new financial year with any new structures in place, and any sort of consultation having been done with staff around moving to that new model. So it is not something that's going to be done in a few weeks, but I think it's right that that's the case, because it's got to be done properly. But obviously, as I say, really keen to line it up very early next year so that we can move forward positively with it.
Sorry, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. By next year, you mean the next financial year or after Christmas? Sorry, I wasn't sure.
Sorry, so after Christmas, in terms of making sure that we're having the appropriate consultation with staff, with a view to then being able to move forward with the sort of new structure as early as we can in the new financial year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Carr.
Yes, hello. I was just curious about the process behind this, because I'm new to this committee and obviously to the council. So I appreciate that the purpose of this is to help inform the pay review that we'll look at in March 22. And so I was just thinking ahead to that. So I was wondering, would we in that March meeting, sort of be presented with a sort of a policy as a sort of a finished item, or would we see some of the results of this in advance of that meeting? You know, would we see sort of the results of the options developed as part of this review and evaluation? Would we have sight perhaps of sort of broad anonymized responses from that staff engagement process? Because I'm just thinking, will we as a committee be sort of consulted prior to that March meeting on how this is going?
Apologies, I was having trouble getting my video back on. So obviously the committee has an important role in terms of looking at the pay policy statement across the organisation, and as we start to work through what that pay modelling could look like, obviously there are potential financial implications of that as well. So we'd be really keen to sort of engage with the committee in terms of you being up to speed around where we are and what the options are looking like. Obviously, there will be some things, as you rightly say, that would need to be anonymised in terms of sharing information around staff engagement, etc. But yeah, very happy to share sort of staff feedback around at an anonymised level around the sort of benefits that that they value, and also what discussions we need to have around that positioning of our pay, if you like, as Councillor Harvey alluded to. So whether that's upper quartile or whether that's something different. And obviously we'd be very keen to engage with members around that so that we get it right for our staff moving forward, because it's really important that we can attract and retain the right people.
Thank you. I was just thinking, you know, in terms of between now and March, I think it would be helpful to have sort of an interim sight of how the evaluation and engagement is going, because I think it would be helpful to have some sort of sense of how things are going, rather than just being presented with it in March, just in terms of process. But that would be my sense of it.
We could table another meeting if members feel that's of benefit. Yeah, seeing some nodding faces. So I think when obviously you're ready to present, Sarah, if we could put another meeting in the diary, that would be brilliant.
And I think it may be one that we can pick up nearer the time, but it may be the sort of key information I can share with yourselves, but because of how important this is to the organisation as a whole, it may be that we can look at sort of a wider all-member briefing so that the members are aware of the activity that's happening. But obviously I'm conscious in terms of HR committee would sort of share with you in advance the sort of key points of that, but I think it may be something that's useful for all members to be aware of.
Okay, Sue, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, if I may, Chair, I think it's really important that we understand that obviously there's a head of paid service role in this, as well as recommendations from the HR committee in terms of the activity that's being undertaken. And it's important that obviously we work it through as officers first before doing fuller updates. So as Sarah says, we're happy to bring back an update, but I don't necessarily think that it's, unless we're at the point of wanting to go out to consultation, we won't necessarily be at a point where we would discuss it in a public meeting. So as Sarah said, we'll have to give some consideration about how we share that information with you.
Okay, no, that's fine. Yeah, if we could have some sort of communication, that'd be brilliant. Councillor Rattigan?
Sorry, just to say that as a portfolio holder, I have regular meetings with Sarah Cragg and Sue on the pay and benefits reviews, and I genuinely think we ought to make sure that we are happy for it to go out to staff before it even appears before us as a committee. They're the most important people in this, not us in the process.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Completely agree with the comments of the staff. Okay, any further questions on that one? So we wait a further update. And then just for the purpose of the minutes, just to confirm that we have received a verbal update on the pay and benefits review. Okay, agenda item 12, against another verbal update, is the Smarter Ways of Working programme. again Sarah to give us an update and an overview.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. So just to pull out some key points to this update. So again, for the benefit of those of you who may not be involved with the committee before. So our Smarter Ways of Working programme, as has been previously briefed to members, is designed to support the council as part of our wider Fit for the Future transformation programme. So this is really about equipping the council to be able to deliver the priorities which are set out within our 2020 to 24 council plan. So the programme's divided into 3 work streams which combine to deliver the overall outcome that we're seeking, which is people, technology and workspace, and there's key individual programmes beneath each of those. So in terms of the people part of that, that's about policy and process, learning and development, communication and engagement and employee relations. So in terms of workspace, again, I'm sure you are aware of this, but the refurbishment of the ground floor of Dean's took place over the spring and early summer of 21, with committee meetings able to take place from the end of July, and officers moved into work on the ground floor from the following week. The work started on the 1st and 2nd floors, with it scheduled for completion in October and full occupancy of the building planned by the end of the year. So obviously the construction work is completing in October, and then there's some times in terms of the furniture, the fitting, the IT equipment, etc., to make it able for officers and members to fully use those upper floors as appropriate. In line with the national government roadmap, and we've already talked about that in relation to COVID-19, we've made parklands available to staff to work out of in individual team zones, so that everyone's got access to a pool of desks that they can work through as a team how they use. And again, we've mentioned those previously in the committee. Just worth noting, I think it's been really positive to welcome staff back to the office, especially those who may have been working from home for a long period of time. And it's been really positive to have some conversations with a number of colleagues when I've been in the office in terms of how positive they found it seeing people again and being able to speak to colleagues face to face, which is obviously really important. And we're continuing to encourage staff to safely sort of re-engage back in the workforce wherever possible. In terms of the people work stream specifically, we're still meeting monthly with our change champions. So again, for the benefit of those who may not have attended committee before, we have change champions drawn from across the organisation. So most business units have someone within their area, if not within individual teams, who attend a monthly meeting, get updates on the project, feed this back to their teams, but also tell us the feedback that they're getting from those they work with, which has been really, really helpful. We had a specific staff briefing just on the Smarter Ways of Working programme in April, which enabled staff to get an update on the programme, but also we took many, many questions that staff had around how it was going and how it was going to work in future. And we keep staff up to date through a dedicated site on our SharePoint, including frequently asked questions, pictures of what's happening, and just general updates for them. As I mentioned previously, we've also developed a virtual session for managers, which we're hoping to pilot shortly, which really supports managers in terms of how we work in this hybrid way moving forward. So looking at how we manage by outcomes, the benefits of smarter ways of working, and again, focusing on staff wellbeing. And I've already mentioned the August wellbeing sessions that we did as well. We also undertook or are undertaking a staff consultation which launched at the end of July, and that was a proposed contractual change around members of staff in roles which can be performed from home, working an average of 40% of their working time from home. So that consultation is live at the moment and closes towards the end of this month. And obviously in terms of engagement with yourselves, also been really positive to be able to welcome yourselves and colleagues back to the ground floor of Dean's, both for committee meetings, but also in terms of the refurbished member suite of group rooms, and to take feedback during the process around the rooms and how they were going to function. And look forward obviously to being able to welcome members and officers back before Christmas in terms of the rest of the Dean's building.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions? Yep, Councillor Harvey.
Thanks, Chair. Just in terms of staff and in terms of people coming back, are we able, obviously in terms of the process, I guess a lot of the physical elements already been decided of how the building is going to be shaped, but in terms of consultation, staff engagement, particularly around flexible working, the changing working practices that we're all seeing, are we able to meet those expectations, particularly the consultation responses from staff? And in particular, one point that I wanted to raise was the ability perhaps for teams to meet together. obviously in the moment, some teams can't because there aren't enough desks for them all when they want to come in. How do we facilitate whole team get-togethers in that way? Is it done virtually? Will it be done hybrid? Are there spaces envisaged whereby staff can come together in order to better organise their own working practices or their own departments in that way?
Thank you. So it's absolutely envisaged that we will have occasions where whole teams are present on site. And although the zones are being done by individual teams, as you can imagine, most heads of service have a number of teams underneath them. So therefore, there's the ability, not only within particular heads of service areas, but also within directorates to discuss with colleagues to manage that. So it is absolutely envisaged that there will be occasions where whole teams can come together. And in fact, that's really important to do so. Obviously, at the moment, we're very cognizant of the fact that there are some individuals who, because of COVID, may find coming in quite difficult. We're working with people about that, but certainly the longer term vision of Smarter Ways of Working was always that although we wouldn't have whole teams on site every day, that there would absolutely be regular opportunities to have staff coming together. So that absolutely is the plan, and we would work with colleagues around sort of sharing desks amongst ourselves, if you like, so that we can make that possible.
Sue, do you want to come in and add to that?
Yeah, so I think it's just important to help members understand that we're obviously not currently working under smarter ways of working. We're just enabling officers to come back into the building and utilise the space as appropriate as we can. As Sarah said, under smarter ways of working, the actual layout of the new spaces will, yes, they will have a reduced number of workstations, but a significant amount of collaborative space. And, you know, I think there's 18 meeting rooms, there's large, and then obviously on top of that, you'll have the chamber, you'll have the committee rooms, that you will have a massive training room. So there will be significant amount areas where large teams could be together on site, which is separate to the desks that they have allocated to each of their teams in terms of working with those reduced number of people in the office on, you know, on a day-to-day basis. So I think it is important to understand there's a slight difference in terms of, because we haven't finished the consultation on SWO in terms of how and when people will work in the office or work from home. That's not how they're currently working. They're just utilising the space that's available. And obviously we do have some big meeting spaces already available, either in Parklands or, for example, the use of committee rooms in the Dean's building, where people can currently come in and have large team meetings if needed. But obviously the longer term vision is there's a lot more capacity for that collaborative working and those team get-togethers.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Carr.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Edwards. I think I'm mostly just interested in what the results of the consultation will be. It would be quite interesting to see, you know, staff's views on this smarter ways of working when the consultations finish, just so that we can have a sense of how staff are responding to these proposals, if that's possible.
I'm not sure where. Oh, you are there, Sarah. Do you want me to
There she
answer that when
is.
you're answering it?
Now, happy to take that, and then if there's anything you want to join in with, Sue, that's fine. So obviously those needs to be considered by officers, because in terms of the specifics of how the services are delivered, then obviously that comes within the jurisdiction of the head of paid service. Having said that, obviously as part of our regular updates, we kind of share the progress of the projects, if you like. So I would absolutely envisage kind of sharing as part of that update how we're moving forward with staff. But in terms of the specific responses, obviously that's something that's kind of being considered on behalf of the head of paid services. It's around how staff will be organised, if you like, to deliver the service. But I don't think there's anything you wanted to add to that, Sue.
No, Sarah, I think you've answered the question in terms of obviously the head of paid service will take the decision along with SLT in terms of the outcomes of that consultation. But as Sarah said, we can give you an update in terms of what that feedback was and how we took that into consideration.
Yes, that's fine. Just broad sort of headlines would be very helpful, just as an update.
Okay, thank you. So we look forward to getting those as well. Councillor Waldridge.
Thank you, Chair. Just a question. Well, I'd just like to repeat the comment I made earlier, because it's repeated again in this paper about sharing with Unison, and and I'd like to see the word consulting with Unison in there again, if possible. And then the other point I'd like to make, and it may be that I should have raised this in the last agenda item, but it's just crossed my mind to raise it now, is that in terms of the smarter ways of working and the changes that inevitably are going to happen to things like travel allowance policies and staff being able to claim travel, is it from their work or from here, and I just wondered how those sort of policies are being worked out, and whether there is full consultation with staff and with the Unison with regard to that, to make sure that's fully encompassed, their views are fully encompassed. And it'd be nice if those could be shared as well, just so we've got a flavour of some of the issues with regard to that. And then the other one is, the other one that springs to my mind is things like if staff are permanently working from home a good percentage of their time, are we looking at helping them during the winter months with things like heating costs and things, because obviously they need their house heated during this period. So, just whether it's taken into account as a benefit or compensated in some other way, just whether that's been looked at as an issue. So I'd welcome your thoughts on those two specific points, please.
Thank you. So as I mentioned when we talked about the policies, the sort of final versions of the amended policies related to smarter ways of working have yet to be shared with Unison for consultation. Having said that, clearly staff travel is an area that they and staff are particularly interested in. So they have already raised with us sort of questions around that and set out what they would be seeking to see in those policies, if you like. But as I say, the sort of final versions have yet to be shared with them in terms of their comments. In relation to the allowances for staff, I think it's really important to recognise that actually a one-size-fits-all is potentially quite difficult, because the type of costs that staff will incur will be different depending on their sort of circumstances at home, how many people they have working from home, etc., etc. So we've supported staff in terms of making them aware of the HMRC scheme, in terms of being able to claim tax relief for the costs associated with working from home. So there's a baseline amount that anyone can claim, which doesn't involve providing additional evidence to the HMRC. However, if anyone feels that they have or are incurring costs that exceed that, then there is the ability to apply for a higher level. You just need to provide the evidence that the costs are sort of directly related to working from home. So that scheme was something that was in place prior to COVID. It's certainly been publicised a lot more during COVID, but it was something that was in place anyway. And as far as we are aware, at least, is something that's set to continue into the future.
Okay, thank you. So, I mean, obviously, going back to the travel thing, so once you've got that feedback from Unison, that their views encompassed in your final offer, as it were, would we get to see a summary of their views as well as what the final offer is?
So as I say, they've sort of put forward some initial comments and thoughts around what they would expect to see. As I say, we'll be sharing the sort of final version of the policy with them as a kind of consultee, if you like, and we'll sort of take their views into account. But obviously, we need to make sure that we have the right policy in terms of the staff and the council moving forward. But yes, as I say, we will be kind of engaging with them on an ongoing basis and have been throughout. So I meet with them on a weekly basis in terms of both smarter ways of working, pay and benefits, and more widely what's happening within the organisation.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? No? Okay. Again, just for the purpose. Oh, sorry, Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Chair. It's not a question to officers, but just a comment on the verbal update, if I can. It's not for this committee, because I'm conscious of this committee's remit, but obviously officers have included the point about members. and the point about the committee rooms. And I would just put it on the record, I think that a number of us have got concerns about the new committee room. A number of us have got concerns about the lack of engagement that's resulted in that smaller committee room and the democratic issues that may well result from that. It's not for this place, I respect that, it's for another debate somewhere else. But it does need to be publicly raised somewhere along the line, either in scrutiny or somewhere in terms of the process. It's obviously a single paragraph at the bottom of this particular verbal update, so it's not for here, but I would just raise that comment because it would be remiss of me not to, bearing in mind comments and conversations taking place amongst members about issues being raised, and also amongst members of the public of their experience of the new committee room. Thank you.
Thank you. That will be minuted for today's committee as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Rattigan.
To Councillor Harvey's point, he has an opportunity at Cabinet tomorrow to raise that in front of us. I'd be delighted to listen to any other comments on the committee room then. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Rattigan. I will do so. Thank you. Cheers.
Okay. Any further questions? Okay, again, just for the purpose of the minutes, we've had the verbal update on this report. It's been noted, plus a few comments such as Councillor Harvey's. Okay, so the next item we're up to is the exclusion of press and public, but I don't think that's applicable today. We've not got any confidential items, but before we close the meeting, I'd just like to go back to the JCC committee meetings. If anybody's got anything they would like to discuss, obviously we will speak to Unison and the staff forum to see what they would like to bring to the table. But if anybody would like to raise any topics, then please do get in touch to do so. And also I'm thinking just timing as well. If we could meet before Christmas, and then I suppose the more we talk in those meetings, the more issues and the more topics will come up to discuss further on. So we can sort of play it by ear for the next meeting and how often we meet. Okay, so it's now 2 minutes past 8. And the meeting has now ended. So thank you, everybody.
Yeah. Sorry,
sorry.
My video's not working. It's Bernie. Sorry, we need to do the work programme.
Oh, sorry, skipped over that bit. Sorry, so before we close, back to the agenda. So the work programme, so we've got the pay policy statement, which is a standard report for the February meeting. And then we've got a few extras, so recruitment, home and lone worker policy as well. Is there anything else that anybody would like to add to the HR work programme, which is separate from the JCC topics? No, so we'll timetable them as applicable. Councillor Rattigan.
Thank you, Chair. In light of the difficulties we're having in recruitment in some areas, I wonder that recruitment and selection policy, I wonder if Sarah could provide us a paper where we are short of officers and where we're struggling to get recruitment right.
Yes, I can provide that for the next meeting, that's fine.
Okay, so we can add that to the February meeting. Okay, right, I think, unless Bernie tells me otherwise, I think covered everything on the agenda. So it's now 3 minutes past 8 and the meeting has now ended. So thank you everybody for attending. Thank you. Bye.